Hi everybody, today we start with the second part, the part 2 of general exceptions, right? So last time the part 1, I think we had done till, let me check out, yes, intoxication, that part. So it's in 3 parts, we'll do part 1, part 2 and part 3. So now we'll start with the part 2 video. Just pay attention and look here. Alright, we are doing BNS 2023. We are referring to general exceptions. Okay. So you may go to the earlier video to see what the other part was, right? Now, first thing, we'll put into groups. The first group would be this fellow and this fellow. They do something by consent. This is the first criteria. They do something by consent and it is likely not to cause death or grievous hurt. Alright, this fellow consents with this fellow, whatever consent they have, to do some act. What? To do some act. And the act is such that it is likely not to cause death or grievous hurt. D for death and GH for grievous hurt. Then, if something wrong happens, then they get the benefit of the general exceptions. So what is it? Example, fencing. In a game of fencing, both of them will have this swords, whatever you call it, and they consent. They know they may get hurt, but it's not illegal and they will likely not to cause death or grievous hurt. Now if someone gets hurt, they are protected. It's not an offense, right? Although by consent. Now this, we'll take the other version of it. This is again a variation of this, alright? Okay. The variation of this would be, here the person also, it is to do something with this person and there is a consent. Say the consent is from this side. He consents. Now there is a consent from him to this fellow consents to this. What? Now the idea is, if it is not intended to cause death, alright, and it is done in good faith, done by consent in good faith, then if something wrong happens, it is not an offense. We'll put the example here, it will be easier. There is a fellow, he gives a consent to do an act which is not intended to cause death. Now something wrong happens, then he is not at fault. He is protected by the general exceptions. Example, suppose he is a patient and he is a doctor. Let's put it easy, he is a surgeon. Alright, this fellow is a surgeon and he is a patient. Now gives a consent to the doctor to operate. He operates. It is not intended to cause death, but he dies. So what happens? It is not an offense, although someone has died by the act. This is number 2. Now number 3, the same consent. Let's put it to be the surgeon again, our friend. Alright. And he gives the consent. This fellow gives the consent. But here the consent was for himself. Here the consent is for a child or a person of unsound mind. Alright. If this is given, this consent is given in good faith. Alright. And the same surgeon, if he operates this child or a person of unsound mind with the consent of this person, then if something wrong happens, he is protected. Alright. So 3 examples. The first one of consent is that both give consent. Here the consent comes from both sides. Both of them will give consent. Here the consent comes from only one side. Right? He gives the consent. But he gives the consent for himself. He is the patient and he gives consent for himself. Here also consent comes from one side, but he gives the consent on behalf of these 2 fellows. Either the child or a person of unsound mind. Now in these contexts, if an act is done by this person, it is not an offense. Correct? Okay. Now there are the theoretical parts which I would like to share with you. But before that, let us deal with consent once more. Now if again an act is done by a person here he does the act, alright, he does the act and there is no consent, right, there is no consent, but this act is done in good faith. This act is done in good faith plus for benefit of this person. But if he does an act for the benefit of this person in good faith, although there is no consent, this is not an offense. I'll take an example. Suppose a tiger carries, let's put him X and let's take him Y, carries Y. X shoots to save Y. Y suffers injury. Alright. Suppose a tiger is carrying Y. That's an example. Illustration is there in the BNS. Alright. Suppose a tiger is carrying Y. X in good faith without the consent of Y naturally does an act what? He shoots to save Y. Y suffers injury. Alright. This is not an offense by X. Correct? Now again we'll talk about communication. Communication. This is another heading. Communication, if done in good faith, it's not an offense. Example, our fellow, this one, the doctor, not many doctors, this is the patient, and the doctor says, you will die in a week. And on hearing this, he suffers shock. And he may also die after hearing this. But the communication was done in good faith, professionally of course. So therefore, this is no offense. Alright? Then we have, if a fellow gives a threat to another fellow and the threat is such that he has, after the threat, he has the apprehension, you zoom it up, alright, of instant death. You kindly zoom it up to see. He has the apprehension of instant death. He gives a threat, and upon receiving it, he has the apprehension of instant death. Now, on such apprehension, if he does some act, it will not be an offense. Wait a minute. This is another example, right? This will not be an offense, but there are two exceptions to it. The first is, this act cannot be murder, and it cannot be an offense against the state punishable with death. It cannot be offense against state punishable with death. It cannot be these two things. These are exceptions. So these are exceptions. So if a fellow does something under a threat for which he has the apprehension of instant death, and he does an act which otherwise would be an offense, but here it is not an offense because he had a fear of instant death. But this exception does not extend to murder or offense against state punishable with death. Right? You cannot do an act which is an offense against the state and punishable with death or a murder. So let us sum up today's classes, the topics. First is consent from both ends. If it is consent from both ends and the act is likely not to cause death or grievous hurt and someone suffers, then it is protected under general exceptions, right? This example of fencing. Fencing is again when both of them use swords or whatever, and if they do so, they give consent, and at the end of it, someone is hurt, no problem. Second, we have the consent from one side. Let us put it this way. He gives the consent. Here, both of them will give consent, and here only he will give consent. Alright, that will be easy too. The red dots will be easier. He gives the consent. The patient gives a consent to the doctor, the surgeon, to operate, because he's otherwise a person who can give a consent. He's not a child or a person under intoxication or of unsound mind, right? And the doctor operates. It's not intended to cause that, but he dies or something wrong happens, the doctor is protected. Who gives the consent? This one, the red fellow. Here also, the consent is given by the person, but for this child or this person of unsound mind. He gives the consent on behalf of the child or the person of unsound mind, say for an operation only in good faith, and something wrong happens, then this person is protected. In all three cases we have used, in those two cases we have used surgeon. Here of course it's a sport. The red dots will help you to identify who is given the consent, right? Here is a case of no consent. When the case of no consent, then we don't have red dots. There is no consent. But if there is no consent and a person does an act for the benefit of the other in good faith, then it is not an offense. Example, X and Y, tiger carries Y, X shoots to save Y suffers injury, X is protected. Done. Next we have communication. If the communication is done in good faith, it is not an offense. Last one is, we talk about threat and apprehension of instant death. If there is a threat by a person to the other and he has an apprehension of instant death and he does an act which otherwise is an offense but is protected under general exceptions. But two things we must understand murder and offences against state punishable with death are not covered under this heading. There is, of course, we're doing things easier. This should cover up, I think. The part 2 cover up. You zoom up, take a shot, click, pick, study hard. CLAT is something which you understand the basics of law. Right? We're not going deeper, but they should cover up. Pay attention and work hard. Right? Chalo. Done. Bye-bye.